Today we're going to start a unit studying how firms make decisions. There's two factors that are going to be important to firms. Revenue, which we've studied before, that's just the price it receives for its units. We'll assume it gets the same price for everything it sells, times Q, the number of units it sells. Since we're talking about one firm, we're going to try to stick to using the lowercase q and reserve the capital Q for a market quantity. When we combine the other variable that we're interested in is costs that we'll discuss for the rest of the day. Together, the revenue minus the costs is the firm's profit, and the profit is basically a summary statistic that tells us everything the firm is interested in. Our firms in our simple model that we'll study in Act 10 are only interested in profit, even though you can imagine lots of other things a firm might be interested in the real world, and you could think about expanding the model, but we'll start by keeping things really simple. So we're going to look at costs for the rest of the day. There's three ways to look at costs. There's the numerical. We can make a table and look at the cost of manufacturing 0 units, 1 unit, 2 units, and we can just read off the table. If we don't make any units, our cost is 5. If we make 1 unit, our cost is 6. If we make 2 units, our cost is 9. We can graph these numbers, so I'll go ahead and I'll plot in some points with this nice blue color. If we make 0 units, our cost is 5. So we have this point here. 1 unit, a cost of 6. 2 units, a cost of 9. And 4 units, cost way up here of 21. And that gives us a sense of what our cost curve is going to look like graphically. When we connect these dots, we see it looks sort of like a parabola. And then finally, and this won't be emphasized as much in this class, but if you take intermediate economics, this is the main way you'll work with cost functions. We can write down an analytical expression. Here the cost function is 5 plus q squared. And if you take some time to pause the video and look at the numbers in our table, the picture that we've graphed, and the analytical expression on the right, you'll see these all represent the same cost function. So there's 3 different ways of looking at costs. Another important concept and way of thinking about cost is going to be in terms of average cost, or AC. The average cost is just the cost divided by the quantity that we're averaging over. So we can look at this analytically, the expression I just spoke of. We can look at it numerically. If we produce 1 unit and our cost is 6, our average cost is 6. And we can do similar calculations if we produce 2 units or 4 units. These are the same numbers from the previous slide. And then finally we can take these numbers from the table and plot some points. If we produce 1 unit, our average cost is 6 up here. If we produce 2 units, our average cost is 4.5. And if we produce 4 units, our cost rises to 5 1/4. And we can connect those dots to get a rough shape of the average cost curve. This average cost curve first declines and then increases, which is clearest if we look at the graph. That's going to be a general feature of average cost curves we look at when we study firms. And we'll see more for the reason for why that is when we study perfect competition. Another important concept, probably the most important concept we're going to be using when we study cost, is the marginal cost. When we think at the margin, we think of the effect of adding 1 more unit or decreasing output by 1 unit. So for our marginal cost, we're going to need to know the difference between costs for 2 different quantities. For instance, our marginal cost of producing a 2nd unit is the difference between the cost of 2 units, 9, and the cost of 1 unit, 6. So our marginal cost here is going to be 3. Similarly, the marginal cost for the 3rd unit is 5. And we can graph marginal cost. We have 3 here for our 2nd unit, 5 for our 3rd unit. And our marginal cost curve will just tend to increase like this, in contrast to our average cost curve. It's important to note that the average cost and the marginal cost are not the same. This is an issue that trips up philosophers, and there was about a 40-year debate in the middle of the 20th century on whether average utility and marginal utility are the same thing. Within utilitarian philosophy, they're not, and that's really, really important. Average costs for us are going to tend to look like a U shape, as we saw before, so this would be AC, and marginal cost will tend to be increasing over the entire region we study. There is a relationship between the two, but it's hard to illustrate analytically unless we use calculus, so we'll stick to graphical analysis in this course. In the worksheets in class, we'll ask you to analyze exactly how the two are related, but for now I'll just draw this graph to be suggestive. Finally, we want to distinguish between fixed costs, which are costs that we're going to pay regardless of the quantity produced, and variable costs. When we look at this analytically, if we have a constant, like the 5 here, that's a fixed cost. It clearly doesn't depend on Q. And then we have other parts to our cost function that depend on Q, like this Q squared. That's a variable cost. So far we've studied 3 cost concepts: total cost, or just cost, average cost, and marginal cost. And there's going to be 3 versions of each. There's fixed total cost, or fixed cost, variable cost, or total variable cost, average fixed cost, average variable cost, marginal fixed cost, and marginal variable cost. One of these you don't actually need to remember. It's the marginal fixed cost. Because the fixed cost doesn't depend on quantity, it's not going to change as we change the number of units we produce, so the marginal fixed cost is always 0, and you can basically just ignore it. Now we move on to our day. Please answer these 3. Please fill in this table. You're given enough information in this table to fill in all the blanks, although it may take some work looking for which equations that you want to use. So please feel free to rewind this video and rewatch parts that you need, and please go back and take notes on the important equations that you might need to help fill in this table. I'll collect these at the beginning of next class. Thank you.